Hey everyone, it's great to see you again. This is Alex Slosby, Noble's class of 1996, here with the story of another Noble's innovator and entrepreneur. This time I'm so excited to have another one of my classmates here with us, Jenai Emmel, class of 1996. Hey Jenai.
Hi, Alex. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today to share your story. Jenai is founder and chief learning officer of School Architects Consulting Group, which is an organizational design and evaluation company that focuses on K-12 systems improvement. She also just graduated from USC with a degree in organizational change and leadership. Jenai has a great story to tell, which starts with Nobles and then actually a return to Nobles during college, which inspired her to focus on education, educational systems change, and entrepreneurship. So really excited to help share her story here today. So Jenai, let's start with Nobles. As you think back to our time there, what stands out to you?
So much, Alex. Nobles was really transformational in my life, and I think one of the most standout experiences, just developmentally. By the time I entered Nobles, Alex, I had already lived in San Francisco and Alaska and Los Angeles and Virginia, and just had a number of different experiences. But Nobles was the first place that I think that I could really be myself. I'm biracial. I grew up in a Buddhist family. I was really unique, but Nobles was a place that I think accepted me kind of for all that I was. And so really what stands out for me, aside from just being able to be myself, is, a few things. First is the well-rounded nature of the program. I really appreciated having the chance to be an athlete, to be an artist, to be kind of service-oriented, and of course, to be an academic. And so by the time I enrolled in college, I'd already experienced success on the varsity field hockey team and the varsity crew team. I had 4 years of photography experience. And I just had a ton of confidence. And I think it set me apart from many of my other classmates. I think the second piece that stands out for me was actually a lot of the diversity-oriented programming at Nobles. I don't know if you remember, but we took entire days off to watch movies and discuss Sankofa. We did the same thing for Schindler's List. We had, African-American professors and artists, and there was just, for me, a lot more diversity than I had experienced before. And so that's another standout component. And I think finally, the assemblies really, really stuck with me. Dick Baker was our headmaster at the time, and I just was really influenced by all of the commentary that he made about traveling the world and how much he encouraged us to do that. And also just really, really encouraging us to explore leadership for the public good. And I think both of those messages really stuck with me and would come to inform a lot of my choices moving forward. So much to celebrate about Nobles, but I think those, kind of 4 areas stand out most.
That's fantastic. So you have our time at Nobles, you graduate, you go to UVA to focus on English language and literature, but then you come back to Nobles one summer, and what happened?
Yeah, so I came back to support Upward Bound. It had kind of just gotten going, and I had the chance to come back as a lead counselor and as a teaching assistant. And I was just really influenced by the students that I had the chance to support. One of those students, his name was David, and he couldn't read. And I think it was just so unbelievable to me that I had had such an enriching experience at Nobles, and then was supporting a student that lived just down the street, looked much like me, but just again, was kind of pre-literate. And so I was really impacted by how humiliated he was in the classroom setting, unable to kind of complete full sentences, unable to sort of sound out many words. And Upward Bound actually worked with him to sort of develop that skill set. But I was just blown away by the injustice of it all. And when you go to a school like Nobles, it makes injustice, I think, really impossible to ignore. So I went back to UVA. I was actually planning on attending law school and just decided to shift course dramatically. And so I was already an English Lit major, and so I could not study education at that time. But what I decided to do was apply to Columbia to their Master's in Education program and to Teach for America. I was accepted into both programs and really decided that teaching was kind of the best route for me. So I was accepted into TFA. I was placed into the Atlanta Corps, and that really, kind of the rest is history.
Well, so it sounds like you had a great experience there. You spent a couple of years, and I think you also earned a pretty big honor in the state of Georgia.
I did. So I taught ninth grade English for 3 years. In my 3rd year, I was selected as Teacher of the Year for the state of Georgia. through junior achievement, and they really recognized my curriculum that I developed from scratch. I used a ton of elements from Noble's like Socratic Seminar to sort of booster my curriculum. And they also honored my integration of kind of a corporate curriculum and entrepreneurial curriculum into my classroom. And so many of us teachers don't enter the field to be honored or recognized for our work. So it's really, I think, unexpected and wonderful to be recognized for my achievements.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely huge. So you then decided to go back to school yourself. What went into your decision to go to Harvard?
Yeah, so it was a big decision. The Teach for America program is just 2 years. I spent an additional year in the classroom, and I was just in a really tough school environment. I loved my students. I actually really loved teaching, but I was in a school that graduated 3% of its students. So if you imagine me kind of teaching 1,000 kids across my 3-year experience, and then at the end of my first year of teaching, I took my kids to the graduation ceremony, and only 30 kids were standing there ready to graduate. And so it was just this awe-inspiring, kind of very confusing moment where I thought to myself, how is it possible that so many kids are kind of lost in the shuffle? What's happened to them? It was certainly not motivating for my students, but even more for me, I really wanted to understand systemically how that was possible. And so if you just circle back to me meeting David a couple years earlier, and I was curious about how he was not a reader at that point, my teaching experience really solidified that this was not an anomaly. It wasn't just one kid that wasn't served well by his school. There were thousands of kids that were not served by their schools. And so for me, I needed to zoom out and figure out what was happening nationally, what was the ecosystem of education that would kind of allow many students to not be served well, and also to find out more about what great schools and what great school leaders looked like. So I entered Harvard with that mission in mind, and it served me quite well.
And it sounds like that then led you to the next chapter of your career, an opportunity to help drive change with school systems improvement, I think starting in New York City.
That's exactly right, Alex. My first systems level role was in the New York City Department of Education. If you can imagine the leap that I made from being a classroom teacher, and then I think really because of Harvard and all of my kind of natural abilities and passion, I landed a job at the nation's largest school system. And that leap, I just don't think is possible if you don't sort of invest in your education the way that I decided to. And so I ended up on a project called Project Home Run. It was the first time I had really seen macro level strategy in play. And to date, it's still one of the best experiences that I've seen, where kind of Bloomberg and Chancellor Klein worked together around the Children's First agenda. And so my work in particular, Alex, was in redesigning human resources and really rethinking how schools are supported by the Human Resources Department. So I was on the change management team, and we were all supported by McKinsey and by Mercer. And so we worked together to redesign every role in human resources, to redesign the entire business delivery service. And then my job was really to announce the change to the internal employees, to get them motivated for the change, and then to actually re-equip them with a new set of skills so that they could support this new service delivery model. And again, it was just like unbelievable work to be doing. It was really exciting. It was very successful. And for me, what that showed me is that while there are big issues to tackle in the industry, there's obviously the opportunity to do this work well, that there is strategy that can make a difference. And if the nation's largest school system can make that kind of a change, I felt confident that other school systems could do the same thing.
Wow, it sounds so impactful and so rewarding for you. But then you made a decision to start School Architects. What went into that decision?
Yeah, so after the Department of Ed, I essentially spent about 14 years, working in schools, either leading schools or supervising schools, and really doing the most that I could for school leaders, kind of creating learning experiences that they could, again, rethink their work in kind of innovative ways. And what that pathway led me to the consulting world, and I had the chance to start evaluating schools all around the country. And even though I was living in Boston, I was evaluating schools in Chicago and Washington, D.C. One of the experiences that really stood out for me in the consulting world was working in Chicago, which is the third largest school system in the country. And as a consultant, the work that we were doing is evaluating their schools because the entire Office of New Schools was essentially not running and not functioning. So I had this opportunity to kind of help them think about school quality, how to evaluate it, and then actually work with the board to then make the decisions on which of those schools should be closed, which of those schools should be replicated. And so doing that work really showed me how impactful consulting could be. However, even though I was working for a really fantastic consulting company, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. I didn't just want to sort of drop a report in front of school leaders and say, okay, go off and do this on your own and figure out how to sort of make these changes, when I knew they really didn't have the capacity to do that. So starting School Architects gave me the opportunity to have longer engagement with school systems. So rather than just working with them for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I could work with them for 2 or 3 years or even longer. And I had my own vision for school evaluation and for systems design and for systems change. And being an entrepreneur gave me that pathway to do it. So now, if you fast forward to the moment we're in, I've been leading my own company for 10 years, and I've had just a number of amazing engagements. And I don't regret being an entrepreneur, as non-traditional as that work is. It's just giving me a pathway to have much more influence and impact. And so the work that I do, you kind of nailed it in the introduction. I do systems level change. A lot of my work is anchored around equity assessments that I lead around the country, and I help school systems redesign their central office with that vision in mind of kind of equitable school systems. And so it's been a joy, it's been a pleasure, it's been really difficult, but it's something that I don't regret doing.
So that's so impressive. But then on top of it all, you decided to go back to school again. So tell me a little bit about
I'm such a glutton
USC.
for punishment. I love school. I love to learn. And actually, consulting and working for myself is a pathway to do just that. How can I continue learning about what's happening nationally? So after all these experiences of supporting school systems, I really felt like, I'm leading change across the country. I don't know that I've studied change formally. And so there are a couple of degrees around the country. There is a program at Vanderbilt, there was a program at USC, and really not many others. And so I applied to both, I was accepted to both, and really decided to study at USC. I'd spent a lot of my time on the East Coast, and I really felt, I'm originally from California, let me go back to my roots and study kind of West Coast more philosophy. And so that's what I'm doing. My degree is organizational change and leadership. I've spent 3 years studying what that looks like, and it's just been really, really impactful for me to ground myself in research and in the inquiry process. I had anecdotal experience that was really kind of useful for me in supporting schools, but there's nothing like getting into research and really learning from top-notch academics around the country on what they see is working well or not working well. And so that really helped me raise my own bar as a practitioner, as a consultant, but even more so raise the bar for school systems that really don't have that R&D internally. They don't have the capacity to learn about great change management theory. And so I'm really bringing that to the table through my work. And so I graduated in May, and I'm publishing my research at the end of the summer. And that degree just gave me, again, another kind of worldview on system change through education. So again, another really impactful and important choice.
Fantastic. So you're establishing this base. What's next? What can you share about where you're headed?
Alex, I think there's a lot. I'm going to continue consulting. I love School Architects. I've made a footprint in the industry. I'm doing some incredible things working with groups like the Gates Foundation and the University of Washington and the University of Virginia and many of the largest school systems in the country. But I'm not sure that that's the only pathway to make a difference. And so what I'm thinking about with my degree is, how can we bring more attention to the issues that I see on an everyday basis? I think education is one of the most important issues in the country. It was certainly impactful in my own life. And if you look at kind of the nation's interest, education is the top 3 interest for just citizens more broadly, just behind actually kind of violence or the economy. But if you turn on the news, we're not sort of getting that level of attention. It would be hard pressed to sort of see education as a top issue in the country if you turn on the news or just read the paper. And so I'm really curious about how to bring more attention, whether that's through news or other mechanisms. But I don't think that just consulting, as impactful as my work has been, I think that that on its own may not lead to the kind of change that I'm looking to make in the country. So that's all that I'll kind of say for now, but I'm certainly going to be steeped in education for the rest of my career. It's just kind of trying to figure out what are these other pathways that I can use to bring more attention, more gravitas, and more impact to the industry.
Well, I love your passion for change, and education, of course, is just such a crucial part of society and growth for all of us. So I think that's fantastic. So maybe the last piece, I mean, as we think about our fellow grads, perhaps current students at Nobles who are passionate about innovation and entrepreneurship in general, but maybe particularly about education, maybe improving schools, here or elsewhere around the world. Is there some guidance?
Yes, I would first of all encourage anybody with any interest in education at all to join the industry. We've got a teacher shortage nationally. There are schools that really need great leaders. There's school systems that need great superintendents, and there's a variety of roles that people can take. There's obviously private education, which changed my life, but my work is really in the public education industry. I would really encourage folks to follow their passion. My career was so organic. I didn't, go into college with this desire to become a teacher or to become a change agent in the public education industry. So I would ask people to just follow their heart. For me, this was a calling. And so I think if others have that same passion and desire, I would encourage them to jump into the industry. Teaching is a great place to start. It's a very difficult career, but it's a very rewarding place to start. I don't know that it's everybody's cup of tea, but I think if you start with students kind of in the classroom, that will lead you to other curiosities and wonderings like I had, which is, why are there so many schools failing students and what can we do about it? But that's not the only question to be asking. And so I think that I encourage Nobles graduates to just follow their heart. Maybe they'll take a non-traditional pathway like mine, which was starting their own company, but they can certainly do other things that are more traditional, like work their way up in one system, learn that region, learn the opportunities, and see where that leads them. And I hope that it leads them to an exciting career like I've had. But if it doesn't, I think that, at minimum, it should ideally create lifelong advocacy in the education industry. You don't have to be a lifelong educator to make a difference. You can do this through charity. You can do this through being a great parent and thinking more carefully about your own children's kind of pathway. But I do hope that for anybody interested in education, that they jump in with both feet and give it a chance and spend maybe 3 to 5 years exploring the opportunities before them and really deciding if they, like me, will make it a lifelong pursuit. So that's what I've encouraged folks to do.
Jenai, that's fantastic. Thanks so much. I think that's excellent advice and guidance. And I'm just so happy to hear about everything you've done and how passionate you are in the change you're making and that you'll continue to make. And so it's been such a pleasure to help share your story. So thanks so much. And to everyone out there, thanks so much for watching and listening in. And please stay tuned. We'll have another story of a Nobles innovator and entrepreneur published soon. Thanks so much.